Hey, Pat, are you there?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you could call in. And first, if you can tell us about the new book you got, Ultimate Nintendo Guide to the NES Library, what can listeners expect?
Well, this is really a labor of love and a labor of insanity, if you can say that, because I don't think anything's been done on this scale before. So what it is picture Leonard Maltin's film guide, but for all the original 8-bit Nintendo games from the 80s to the 90s. So it's a review, an overview of over 750 games released in North America between 1985 and 1995. There's also reflections for each game, sort of like more personal tales. Maybe the reviewer remembers playing it when they were a kid. Maybe they remember a funny commercial. Maybe there's anecdotes about the history of the game that could go along with it. There's also, full color screenshots of each game, pictures of the carts, if you want to know what they look like, and as well as other miscellaneous sections such as the European exclusive games. There's a short accessory guide, test carts, promo carts, and there's more. There's even a whole subsection of articles written by other authors pertaining to particular aspects of the system. For example, an overview of the history of Wisdom Tree, which did the Bible games on the NES. There's also an article about the Tengen versus Nintendo lawsuit, things of that nature. So there really is a lot packed in there. One of the reasons why it's taken me over 2.5 years to put this together.
Yeah, that is incredible. I got to assume there's been a lot of research and prep that went into the book, and you probably have to play through all 750 of these games, too.
Oh, yeah, of course. Now, I didn't play through all of them. I'm responsible for about 450 out of the roughly 750 game reviews, which is still the majority. It's still a lot of work, but I hired about 5 or 6 others to help alongside with me. A couple of guys that people might have heard of, maybe not, but the collaborator on my podcast, Ian Ferguson, is responsible for about 150. Brett Weiss, who's written other video game books, such as the 100 greatest console games between 1977 and 1987, he wrote about 60 for the book. So there's a bunch there, but yeah, you have to go back, and even if you are slightly familiar with the game, yeah, you have to go back and play through it to get a good idea for the review. Even if each review is only about 150 to 200 words, you have to be accurate with what you're talking about. Obviously, now, fortunately, I didn't have to replay all the games. Like something like Mike Tyson's Punch-Out or Legend of Zelda. I know those games like the back of my hand. I wouldn't have to. But even those titles that maybe I played 4 or 5 times in the past few years, oh yeah, I definitely go back and play them just to be safe and know what I'm talking about.
Well, I know you put up a Kickstarter campaign for the book. It looks like you blew past the goal within the first day, so obviously the book's going to be out there, and people can still get a chance to sign up for it, though. Oh,
yeah. The funny thing about the Kickstarter is that I launched it literally an hour or two before we started the 6th annual NES Charity Marathon, so I wasn't even paying attention to it, really. I was just kind of on and off looking while we were playing games live during that weekend to raise money for the Children's Miracle Network. And then it got funded sometime midday Sunday, so about 24 hours after launch, and I was surprised. I mean, I had a feeling it would get funded, but I thought maybe it would take a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks. But no, I'm kind of overwhelmed with the feedback so far and with the amount of attention. I think it's already the most popular publishing Kickstarter campaign. So yeah, I'm just thrilled that people have responded to this.
So with that being said, do you take another year or two out of your life and do another one for maybe Sega Genesis or Super Nintendo down the road?
Probably. I would say never, but this took so much out of me, and it's not even 100% complete. It's probably like 97% complete, but that's a big 3% left. This is a book that I think I didn't expect it to be as detailed as it was. It was not going to start out being this detailed. And then plus, I didn't think it would take this long. I really didn't. I thought, maybe take a year and a half, but 2.5 years. I'm not sure. I definitely want to write more, but I might write something more either fictional or something that's more of a narrative versus a guidebook. If I was going to do another one off the bat, I probably would do something like a TurboGrafx 16 book, because that's only 130 plus games, so that's a lot more manageable. But doing something like the Super Nintendo or Genesis, oh man, just maybe ask me in a year or two when I've recovered from this.
Well, I got to ask you, Pat, how you got into this line of work, I guess. YouTube, a gamer personality, it's really big now, but I know you kind of got in there on the ground floor and were one of the few guys that kind of started when it was all back in the day.
Well, it wasn't exactly the ground floor, and I wish it was, because I started in 2008, and the ground floor was really about 2006. That's when guys like James Rolfe got started. Not that it would have blew me up entirely, but the earlier you started on YouTube, when there was way less people doing videos, the better off you were, because back then it's not like now where anyone could buy, use their cell phone even to shoot pretty good film. Back in 2006, 2008, 2009, HD wasn't even a regular thing yet, and you had to go out and buy a camcorder that cost $500-600 in order to shoot video. It was sort of still a new frontier. But the way I really got into it was just that I shot a film in college. I did a couple of short films, and I was always collecting video games, specifically NES games, since about '99. So I saw people like James doing videos, and I saw a lot of bad quality videos. To be quite honest, about people that really didn't know what they were talking about. They were young kids that were just capturing games off an emulator. And so I figured I could at least do as well as that, if not better. And that's really how it started back in June 2008. And it sort of continued from there.
Well, are you surprised then, how popular the Pat the NES Punk videos have become? And I guess just online gaming videos in general, it's kind of become almost kind of the new thing that kids do nowadays.
I'm not shocked, just because there's always a new media that comes around, every 20, 30 years, something pops up that's newer. So, you had the internet really get popular not even less than 20 years ago. So it's really the extension of I guess, the video game culture. And children now, grow up playing games when they're like 3 years old. Now you see like little babies with a phone in their hand playing mobile games. So video games it's like the biggest industry now. It's bigger than movies. So I'm not totally shocked. I could not have predicted the popularity of Let's Play videos, though. That's something I did not see coming to the extent with the Let's Plays and Twitch being so huge. That I did not see coming. I guess I'm too old for that in terms of my creative process. I'm more into like the filming aspect and telling stories versus that. But in terms of the Pat the NES Punk videos, I appreciate you saying they're popular, but in terms of everything else I think it's really not popular at all. When you talk about things like Let's Plays or Minecraft videos or things like that, where they dwarf my channel by factors of 10 or 20 or even more. I mean, you look at PewDiePie; he's the biggest guy on on YouTube, and he does Let's Play videos. That's what he does. He really doesn't do produced content. He just records himself playing games, and then he's good to go. Will I get to that point and do that myself? Yeah, I probably will at some point do it in a much more smaller way, just to get a piece of that pie, I guess. And plus, people always do want to see you play games. Ian and I played for charity over 27 hours last weekend. So, I mean, it is what it is. People want to see you interact with the games, and then plus they can chat with themselves and with the others there. So it's more like a community setting with the whole Let's Play thing.
But yeah, when it comes to your videos, though, I mean, it has kind of spawned several different facets, the Flea Market Madness and the Video Game Years series. You mentioned your podcast. I know you do conventions and, obviously the Ultimate Nintendo Guide coming out. So you've kind of almost created an NES Punk dynasty in a way.
Well, dynasty. We'll continue on past me. Will I franchise it out to a 15-year-old? Well, it's really just doing what I like. So, I mean, I've always loved flea markets. And so when I shot the first Flea Market Madness back in 2008, no one was doing that. By the time I edited it in 2009 and put up on game trailers, I was shocked at that reception. I said no one wanted to see some goofball walk around a flea market. But now it's like its own subgenre on YouTube. 6 years later, everyone's doing pickup videos and flea market videos and things of that nature. So it's more about me just doing what I've always loved and sort of incorporating it into the YouTube world. Now, the Pat the NES Punk series is sort of particular in the fact that it's more like comedic and there's sketches involved, but you also get some game reviews thrown with it. And then the podcast to me was always sort of something that I probably even should have got into sooner, because I had a slight radio background from college. I'd done a radio show for a couple of years, and I always would walk into Luna Video Games where my collaborator Ian, my co-host, he works, and we would just shoot the stuff. I'm on radio for hours, sometimes just talking about things we were into. So we figured, why not just do a podcast? And that's where it came about. And some people would argue, rightly or wrongly, that I'm better at being a podcaster than producing video content. well, at least producing a podcast is easier. So for that, I may maybe spawn off the podcast and going in other directions. Who knows in the future? Besides video games, there's always like social commentary, political stuff. But for now, yeah, I really enjoyed it a lot.
And for the people out there listening who know your work, they probably know that you own most of, if not all of, the games that are featured in the new book, Ultimate Nintendo Guide to the NES Library. And collecting seems like it's at an all-time high now, and game prices as well. Of course, back in my day, you could walk into Funko Land with $20 and leave with 12 games. It doesn't seem like it's that way anymore.
Yeah, I would say the tipping point, there were two tipping points. 2006, I would say more and more people got into it, but not even by a huge factor, maybe a factor of like 3 or 4. But then it tipped again about 2012, 2013, definitely by 2013, early. I'd say 2.5 years, or it's now magnitude about 10 to 15 times more than that. It's really a combination of lots of things. I think social media, I think YouTube, it's easier to find, past video history, things of that, past video game history, things of that nature. There's more exposure to it more easily. There's more re-releases of stuff like Mega Man, coming out, Mega Man 9 and 10 coming out on newer consoles. So then you go back and rediscover prior Mega Mans. Ocarina of Time comes out in 3DS. So you go back to the N64 and discover stuff in that library. So it sort of compounds that way. And plus you have all the younger kids growing up, and, you have now, guys like me in your 30s or 40s and having kids, and then you pass it along to them, the older games. And then those kids grow up and become 8, 9, 10, and they want to buy those older games. So it's interesting. So, like, now you go to conventions, and it's not uncommon, a retro gaming convention, now it's not uncommon to see, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds walking around, 14-year-olds, and they want these older games that they weren't alive for. There was one kid in particular, a Retro Gaming Expo in Portland. The first time I went there in 2011, he was probably only like, 10 years old, and he already had like over 200, 300 NES games. And that's probably from his father, sort of passing that down. And now I see him 4 years later, and he's grown up, basically in high school, and he has most of the NES games. So there is going to be a point, though, where the number of games will run out. And at that point, then, you might see the market sort of rubber band and retract a bit, just because if there's not games out there to buy and they're prohibitively expensive, people will not want to collect. That's always the danger when that happens, when there's way too much interest, because it's not like they're making new NES games anymore. They're not making new GameCube games or new Sega Genesis games. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next few years when a game like Contra, which is right now like $35 or whatever, what if that doubles in price? I don't picture tons of people wanting to spend $70 on Contra, a game that's extremely common. I just don't see that happening. And then you'll have to ask yourself, will people then be less interested? Will they just go and buy flash cards and load the ROMs up? It definitely, the game prices can't rise forever, though, especially for the very common games.
Well, I want to ask your thoughts on the original Nintendo, and I guess why people are so nostalgic for it. I know I'm a bit biased because I grew up in the 80s, but you mentioned, instead of collecting Xbox and PlayStation 4 games, 10-year-olds are looking for the old stuff. I mean, is it just the NES was so great, and that's probably never going to be duplicated again? Is it kind of just going to be, that's the system to collect for, you think?
Yeah, when you look at the NES, it really kickstarted the North American console market. Before that, it fizzled out with the video game crash of '83, and you really had nothing left. The NES was really the first video game console to have decipherable mascots that you can market. Now there were, Donkey Kong and Pac-Man, they were marketable to a degree, but the games that they inhabited weren't these living, breathing worlds. You have a game like Super Mario Brothers that the first time you have this world you can explore with a character that is just slightly more decipherable than Pac-Man. It's a person. You can see a mustache on it. Overalls. That didn't happen before. You didn't have a Mega Man before. You didn't have a Legend of Zelda franchise. You didn't have all these games that, again, were living and breathing compared to something like on the Atari or even ColecoVision. It just didn't exist. So with that, it sort of captured the imagination, I think, more so than any other console at the time, and it started so many game franchises that are still around today, and it was really helped grow so many game companies that are still around today. I think that's a large reason why the NES is still beloved. Besides the fact that Nintendo is still they're not the most dominant force in the video game industry anymore, but they're still obviously very powerful. Even if the Wii U isn't selling as much as the PS4 or Xbox One, still a lot of people have it, and a ton of people have the 3DS. And these game franchises, particularly the Mario franchise, is the most famous game franchise in the world, and that's never going to go away, you know. And you still have all these other beloved characters around, and so it's really Nintendo is sort of like the touchstone of I think video game culture in this country, more so than any other console. The way it sort of blew up into the mainstream, the way it sort of became a part of pop culture, the way by the late 80s you had Nintendo characters on multiple cartoons, and then you had T-shirts, you had Nintendo cereal. It just dominated our society in terms of that it really was for a new generation, brand new video games. You know, there's like a good sort of 5-year gap between video games, at least on the console, being not played that much. And so Nintendo was for a new generation. That's what they knew video games to be. So much so that, you know, you had people refer to video games as Nintendo, almost like, you know, what's another example, like petroleum jelly and Vaseline. You know, Nintendo was the Vaseline of petroleum jelly for video games.
Yeah, well, again, the book, Ultimate Nintendo Guide to the NES Library, you can head to the Kickstarter page and order your copy. I basically got mine because I don't have the means or the time to collect all 750 games, so it's easy to just have them in the book and look at it from time to time.
Yeah, pretend that you can own them all. You can own a little Samsung that's not like, you know, $700, $800. Yeah, it's at ultimatenes.com. That's an easier URL that'll redirect to the Kickstarter site. And yeah, we're probably going to close in on 1,000 backers very soon, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome for sure. And looking forward to the book. And is there anything else you got coming up afterwards, or any upcoming projects you want to mention?
Well, I'm going to get back into doing the Pat the NES Punk videos, more Ask Frank, back to the Flea Market Madness. I'm probably going to do my Volume 5 DVD, the first half of 2016 already. Wow. So be on the lookout for that. And then I just relaunched my website, thepunkeffect.com, with a new skin on it, but it's sort of in the soft launch phase. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. When you're sort of a internet entrepreneur, there's always sort of stuff to look after, new projects to sort of shepherd. And so that's the exciting part, and that's what I guess what kind of draws me to it.
Excellent. Well, again, Pat, I am a huge fan of your work, and I really appreciate you taking the time out. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Justin. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, man. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.